to a Hope 1032 podcast.
The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. And today we're joined by Katrina Clifford from Robert Menzies College at Macquarie University. In episode 34 of the Hope Book Club, we're exploring themes of love and loss. Katrina Clifford has been reading Sea Wife by Amity Gage, a story about a family who buy a boat and sail around the Caribbean with mystery, tragedy and intrigue thrown into the mix. Natasha has been reading H is for Hawke by Helen Macdonald, the story of a woman who is grieving her father, and a memoir of the tenuous but growing trust between human and hawk as one attempts to train the other. And I've been reading A Song for the Road, a debut novel by American author Kathleen Basi A, the story of a grieving wife and mum who takes a flip-a-coin road trip devised by her late teenage children. It's a musical sojourn about coming to terms with the past and forgiving yourself and others. Plus, we'll discuss which authors or series we return to for a comfort read. But first, let's hear from Amity Gage with Sea Wife.
And now I am sitting in a closet. Michael's closet. I should explain. I moved in a couple of days ago. I came in here looking for something of his and discovered that the carpet is very plush. The slatted bifold doors filter the sunlight beautifully. I feel calm in here. Hiding in closets is the habit of children, I know. I used to hide in my mother's closet when I was a kid. Her closet contained some dressy silks and wools she never wore. I loved holding these fabrics against my body or stepping into her high heels as if onto a dais, rehearsing my future. I never felt ashamed. Surely there is some connection between seeking refuge in my mother's closet long ago and hiding in Michael's now, but that insight does not help me. Sometimes life just writes you tiny, awful poems. I am uncertain whether or not I can survive this day. I mean, if I want to. To go out, to go outside, requires preparation and composure. If I were to go out, to start walking around and seeing people again and going to the grocery store and getting on with it, invariably what someone would ask me is, "Do you wish you'd never gone?" They will expect me to say, "Yes, our journey was a mistake." Maybe that's what they hope I will say. But saying yes to the boat was my clearest act of loyalty toward my husband. I can't afford to regret it. If I did, I would only be left with my many disloyalties.
Sea Wife by Amity Gage is the story of a family who are going stale. Michael is not enjoying his job. Juliet has given up on her PhD and is struggling in her role as a parent. They get a new lease of life when they decide to buy a boat and take their family to sea. But they are unprepared for the challenges they find there. Katrina Clifford is Dean of Academics at Robert Menzies College at Macquarie Uni, and she's enjoyed the adventure of Sea Wife. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, Katrina.
So Juliet and Michael take to the sea with their young family. What is their family like before they set off for this adventure?
Yeah, they're not in a great place as a family or as individuals, really. Michael's very frustrated in his job. He works in an office, but he has this sense of manliness means to be self-sufficient and strong and capable and providing for your family. And so he has been captivated by the idea of taking his family to sea for a year and sailing around, ideally the world, if he can convince his wife to go along with it. His wife, Juliet, is majorly depressed, has significant depression that is going untreated, that stems from childhood trauma and an estrangement with her mother and just the struggles of being a mum with young kids. She's given up on her PhD and she's just really lost. And so the two of them, their marriage has gone really stale. They're not connecting well with each other. They're not connecting well with their kids. And Juliet eventually sees that what they need is to do something completely different. And so eventually goes along with this crazy idea of Michael's to buy a boat and go sailing, not particularly around the world, but around the Caribbean at least.
So are they relatable characters?
They are. Neither of them are amazingly lovable. I think you do connect with both of them more and more as the book goes on. But they're both deeply flawed. They're both very selfish and self-absorbed. They're both very much stuck in their own worlds and stuck in their own heads, and find it difficult to see outside of their little bubble. But that's something that changes as they go to sea together, and they're kind of forced to live together in this very small space and work out how to work well together. So they become more and more likeable, I think, as they grow through this experience.
So these guys are novice sailors. How does life at sea challenge them?
Well, in all the ways that you would expect. The boat breaks, there's storms, and there's all sorts of nautical disasters that go on. But the thing that challenges Juliet the most is this sense of back at home in Connecticut in their normal life, she could hide from her struggles and hide from the fact that she was suffering from major depression. Whereas the sea is just a vast emptiness that kind of exposes everything. And so she's forced to deal with her own kind of sense of internal emptiness because she's surrounded by this emptiness at sea. Michael's very much wanting to be in control and in command, and so doesn't like it when things don't go his way and when he can't control things. And so he has to struggle through that and deal with that tendency of his as well.
So how does their relationship change while they're at sea?
So that's quite a difficult question to answer until you kind of get to the end of the book, because the book actually starts with Juliet back in their house in Connecticut and hiding it in the closet. And it becomes clear very quickly that she has returned to the house with the two children, but Michael hasn't come back. And so the question that kind of overshadows this entire book is what has happened? Clearly something has happened on this sea voyage, something disastrous, something tragic. Has Michael chosen not to come back? Is he dead? Is he missing? What does this mean for Juliet and the family? And so you kind of have this kind of two-layer investigation of their relationship. As the book goes on, it's told in kind of two different types of narrative. So you get Michael's sea log, which he's used as a journal, and Juliet's first-person narration, both of what's happening in the present and what's happened in the past. And you gradually put these things together and see how their relationship deepens and they come to a better understanding and appreciation of each other as part of the voyage. But always with this big question over the top of it of what has happened? How did they get from where they start, where you see them at the beginning buying the boat and preparing it and setting out to sea with what looks like a genuine improvement in relationship, to only end with Juliet on her own. And the sense of suspense and the sense of questioning and what on earth has happened here is really pervasive throughout the book and really makes it a significant page turner.
Ah, a page turner. I wasn't expecting that. Did you get the feeling of being out at sea as you read it?
Absolutely. One of the really lovely things about the setup is that Juliet she's abandoned a literature PhD, but she loves words and she loves descriptions. And so when she talks about the sea, when she talks about the islands they visit, you get a really strong sense of place, you get a really strong sense of the sea as almost another character in the novel, as a sometimes benevolent and sometimes malevolent force that they need to get along with and work alongside. It really, really is evocative of a particular place and really made me want to go and visit some of these places that they sail to because they just sound absolutely amazing. There's one island they visit quite early in the book that's just perfect, an absolutely perfect island, completely uninhabited, where they stay for a couple of weeks until they run out of food, but it just sounds like paradise, just a gorgeous place of sand and trees and blue ocean all around. Exactly the sort of place you want to be reading about when you're stuck in lockdown and not allowed to go on holidays anywhere at all.
Yep, okay. So just to wrap up, Katrina, what did you like about this and what did you take away from it?
Yeah, so I loved the descriptions. I found them really beautiful. I loved the narrative style and the way it was made up of these interlocking narratives between Michael's point of view and Juliet's point of view. I loved the sense of mystery and intrigue, that overarching question of what has happened and how is it going to be resolved, how is it going to get fixed. And I really enjoyed seeing the way these two deeply flawed people were trying to make the best of something, and really working hard at making the best of it and improving their lives, improving their marriage in ways that didn't quite work for them in the end. But that sense of striving was really encouraging.
Okay. That's Katrina Clifford from Robert Menzies College. She's been talking about Sea Wife by Amity Gage. Have you read it? Email us bookclub@hopemedia.com.au or text in 0448 40 20 20. Thanks, Katrina. Sounds like a great read.
It really is. I'd highly recommend.
Next, we are talking about H is for Hawke by Helen Macdonald. So Helen Macdonald is a woman who finds herself very alone in life. She's a writer who, when she's approaching 40, finds herself without a family, job or home. And when her father dies, it knocks her for 6. She buys a goshawk and sets a goal to train it to hunt. And in her relationship with the hawk, she explores her grief for her lost father. Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity has been reading this one. G'day, Natasha.
Hi, Katrina. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right. Helen is grieving her dad. Is she a sympathetic character? Do you connect with her grief?
Yeah, she describes her grief really beautifully and also hauntingly, I suppose, and it really hits her very hard. Obviously, the death of a parent is really intense, and for her especially, I think, some people just kind of carry on and submerge it a lot, and everybody has their own ways of dealing with it. And she really does kind of fall apart. Like she kind of loses her mind a bit, and she knows that that's happening, but also she can't really do anything about that. So I think the book does a really good job of acknowledging what it's like, that grief is, one of those things where, I mean, maybe this is a bit kind of irreverent as a way of talking about it, but that kid's book, is it I'm going on a bear hunt, where it's like you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you got to go through it. And she just has to go through it. But because it's not just a story of grief, like this is kind of actually a story of kind of 3 stories. It's kind of her grief memoir. And I think if it were just that, it would just be a slog and just really hard to read. But it's also this story of her training this goshawk, and that's kind of a wild, weird, unusual thing for most of us, like a world that we just are not familiar with. And then also she weaves that in with looking back on the life of this writer, T.H. White, who also tried to train a goshawk and whose life was really difficult. And so she's kind of, she's an historian and philosopher of science. She's an academic, she's a writer. So the way she approaches all of these things and weaves them in, really kind of they feed each other. So even though you're going through the slog of the grief with her, it has that kind of checkeredness of like the other things. So it's not too much for you, even though it is really overwhelming for Helen.
And how did you sort of find reading all the details about training the hawk?
I really liked it. So I'm sure it wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea, but actually, because so T.H. White, who lots of people wouldn't have heard of, but he used to be quite well known. He wrote a book called The Once and Future King, which is a story of like a retelling of King Arthur, the Arthurian legend. And actually the first book in that kind of larger book is The Sword and the Stone, the, beloved Disney movie. So people might kind of know him through that. But the whole book is fabulous. And one of the things I loved about The Once and Future King is that he goes into all this detail about like medieval siege warfare and about falconry and all these kind of arcane subjects, which should be boring, but because of the way he does narrative, you're just kind of borne along and you're like, I don't know what that means, but like I'm in, like this is fascinating seeing this world. And I feel like a bit with H is for Hawke, you're introduced to this completely alien world for most of us, this, human craft or practice that has been going on for centuries, and it's accumulated its own kind of practices and its own gear and its own language. And, she kind of explains what things are, but also you're just kind of drawn into, oh, people have these skills and have thought about how all this works. And, for most of us outside of that world, we'd have no idea. But it's kind of like there's a charm and a beauty to being like, whoa, this whole thing exists. And it's kind of really cool.
It's probably good that she's learning it for the first time and then you're learning it alongside her, because that would almost be easier.
Yeah, I mean, she is kind of, in a way, the best of both worlds in that she is an expert falconer, so she's always done falconry, but training a goshawk is like apparently this whole different thing. So they're just a lot wilder, they're a lot harder to tame. So she kind of, even though she has a lot of experience, finds herself to be a novice, a beginner at this particular process. And so she finds that it kind of is almost teaching her like over how to do life again, which is what she needs, having been kind of really knocked flat by the death of her father. I mean, a lot of people find this, right, just in terms of like having a pet or whatever, or having something or someone that you need to care for. And so you can't just kind of fold in on yourself. Like the hawk needs her because she's brought it into her life and, it requires her care and her training. And so that's like this demanding thing that means she has to get out of the house and go out into, the wild fens and fly her hawk. And so there's kind of that level of like, oh, well, having an animal in your life requires that of you. But then also her kind of diving into like what the wildness of nature is like and what the wildness of kind of grief and human emotion is like. And it just kind of all works really surprisingly well.
So who do you think this book is for?
So I think, it's a beautiful book. It's brilliantly written. It's very powerful. I do think it's maybe not for everyone. So there were particular things that I really liked about it. Like it's set in and around Cambridge, which is a place that I've lived. And so I really liked kind of the location. I am a fan of The Once and Future King, T.H. White's book. And so I was kind of interested in that. And I liked kind of the language of it all. But I think for people who are interested in any of those things, or for people who care about wilderness and nature writing, it's great on that. If people are into birds, I know a lot of people are, then you'd love this book. And maybe for someone who's processing grief or who knows someone who is, like, I think it's really helpful on that front to kind of walk you through, well, this is one person's experience of diving deep down into this, being dragged down into it and coming out the other side, and how that happens, and also how messy that is. So, that may or may not be helpful for you at a particular stage of your own grief. But, I think it's one of those books that it is about some really specific things. And so but quite a few specific things. So any of those could be an in for you. But if none of those appeal, then it might not be for you.
Yeah, that was me when I tried to read it. I just didn't quite get into it, but I think I'll try it again in the future. Thanks, Natasha.
You're welcome.
Now, we all know about comfort eating and emotional eating. So, ladies, what I want to know is, are you an emotional or comfort reader? And if so, what's your author or series of choice? What's your Tim Tam of the book world? Katrina?
Well, at the moment, I've been rereading Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache mystery series. This is crime fiction set in Quebec. Gamache is a wonderful main character, just a really good person. I think one of the things I love about crime fiction as comfort reads is that with absolute certainty that by the time you get to the end of the book, everything will be solved and finished and done. And so particularly in a world where so many things are uncertain and we don't know how long things are going to be bad for and what's going to happen next, knowing that there's a hugely, incredibly competent person who is going to solve this crime in 300 pages is just really comforting for me. And I just love the sense of place and the characters. It's recurring characters and they're really quirky. They're just really good, fun books. If people like that kind of cozy crime genre, they're a really excellent series to pick up.
Well, my choice is cozy too, though it's not technically crime. There are two series by Alexander McCall Smith that are set in Edinburgh. There's the Sunday Philosophy Club series with the philosopher Isabel Dalhousie and her gorgeous younger bassoonist hubby. And then there's the 44 Scotland Street series as well. People who read it will know about 6-year-old Bertie, who's been 6 for about 25 years. I think he might have actually turned 7 eventually. But both those books are stories about a particular community and a set of characters and the way they interact and the small dramas of their lives, and often have little mysteries that get solved as well. But I find that often, when life is getting a bit shaky, I go, maybe it's time to, revisit my old friends in Edinburgh. Yeah. Also, another writer who just celebrates good people and good characters that make you feel better about the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to go with, I thought about crime. There are a few series that I do like to go to for similar reasons to you, Katrina. But, I actually think, and I'm going to steal kind of Katrina's professional thunder here and go with Austen, because she is just so satisfying, and every time you go back to her, she's like funnier than you remember. And this time around in lockdown particularly, but also, so last year I reread Pride and Prejudice with some friends. This year I reread Persuasion with some friends. So we were kind of reading a few chapters a week and talking about it on a Facebook group. And, almost everyone had read it before, but there were always things where we were like, oh, I never noticed this before, or how hilarious was this scene? And that really enhances it. And I think, even though the things that we like there are that in the series you guys talked about were that there are these really good people, and that's nice. I think one of the delightful things about Jane Austen is like there are so many unbearable people and she's very funny about why they're unbearable, and that's weirdly satisfying as well.
Because you're laughing at people, not with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're laughing with your heroine who has to put up with these people and is very patient about that.
Yeah.
Or not very patient about it and complaining about them endlessly for reasons that are very apparent and you can completely sympathise with.
That's right. Yes, I'm thinking immediately of the obsequious Mr. Collins.
But yeah, I mean, Anne Elliot's family is like her sister and her father are just...
Well, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that I need to read Louise Penny, because you've both strongly recommended her to me, guys.
Oh, she's so good.
I do like her, though. Then I started reading Tana French, which is like the Dublin kind of crime series, and I think she's even better. But she's not upbeat about human nature at all. So very different experience, not a comfort read.
Yeah, I think for lockdown, the Louise Penny would be the one that I would want for this point in time. So, yeah. Well, I had a beautiful lockdown read. I have been reading a book called A Song for the Road by a debut American author, Kathleen Basi. And this was one of the very rare times that someone has emailed me completely cold and said, hey, I saw about your book club. I wanted to let you know about my book. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, yeah, thanks, but, I can't read every book that people send to me. But this one really got me in. So it's the story of a Miriam Tedesco. She is a musician at a Catholic church, so like a liturgical musician. So she leads, everything from funerals to festivals. And she's actually lost her family in a car accident. And we discover this very early. The book opens with her receiving flowers from her dead husband. Basically, her teenage daughter had set up an auto send thing every year because it was sort of a running gag that he used to send her the same bunch of flowers every year on her birthday. And as you can expect, she kind of falls apart in the middle of a congressman's funeral. Anyway, she has to take some leave from her job. And as she starts to clear out her teenage daughter's room, she opens her computer and finds a project that her daughter was planning, a flip a coin road trip for her mum and dad to take while her and her brother were away at a summer music camp that they've been building up to. And so Miriam finds herself with really this is all she has left of her daughter, and so she decides to take this flip a coin road trip across America and sort of ends up in the place where her family died. Now, that sounds like you'd probably listen to this and going, why would I want to read that
I'm
book?
like crying already, Katrina. Like, why would I read this?
It's just a beautiful, beautiful book. The grief in it is not overwhelming. Like, obviously, this is a huge thing that she's lost her family. But I think the road trip kind of gives her new life. And along the way, she meets a pregnant stranger called Dicey, who she ends up giving a lift to, and she has a connection with this young woman, and the reason for that connection sort of emerges as the story progresses. But they form a friendship, and the two of them are kind of keeping each other going. And on this trip, as she starts sort of posting on social media, she becomes a little bit well known, and she's also a musician, and she's traveling with her children's instruments, and she is also trying to write her son's unfinished piano sonata as she goes. And so this story, it's just a beautiful coming together of, she's a really relatable character. She's flawed. She's got things in her past that she's struggling to reconcile with. She's grieving her children, and she had a difficult relationship with, her teenage daughter, as many people do. But she's also struggling to write the music that her son never finished, and to, I guess, pay her respects to him in that way. And so, like I guess you said, Natasha, with H is for Hawke, there's so many different points at which you can connect with this story. Like, if you're a music lover, you have any kind of connection with classical music or church music, there's the sort of relationship between the mum and the teenage kids. There's her issues in her marriage. And then there's this road trip and adventure and getting to know a stranger and learning to forgive yourself and understand your past. So there's just so much going on in this book, but it's really beautifully written and it's really relatable.
Oh, should we read it?
Definitely. It's, one of the things that I enjoyed about this book, and this is only a small part of the book, was just the way her Catholic faith is just a very natural part of the story. Like, this is not an inverted commas Christian book, but her character is Catholic. And so in her thoughts around both her job, which is in a church, but also around death and grieving, she'll throw up a prayer here and there, or she'll stop into a church and play the organ as a sort of form of therapy. And I've just never read a book where someone's faith is so real and raw and just a part of who they are without it kind of being trying to make any kind of point.
Gilead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have read Gilead as well by Marilyn Robinson.
Yes.
But I guess this is more of a modern story of a modern person who thinks in a modern way but still has that faith. I think that's kind of rare.
Great.
Katrina, I'm wondering, we know that grief is not a process that you kind of get to an end of. How does the book finish? Did you find that it came to a satisfying conclusion? Are you happy with the ending?
Yeah, there's about three or four different parts of the story that have to resolve. So there's her relationship with Dicey, and there's a bit of mystery there about what's really going on for Dicey, and that has a satisfying resolution. There's her willingness to face up to her own past and some things that she probably didn't get right that she needs to correct, and that has a good resolution. And then she actually arrives at the spot where her husband and her children travelled their final destination, as well as meeting some of the people who were with them in their final days. And so, again, she really faces up to her grief. But I guess where she gets to is the point where she has a couple of things to live for still, I think whereas at the beginning of the book, really everything was falling apart and she just couldn't keep going the way she was. I think when she gets to the end of the book, I think she's really addressed some things that she needed to address in her life, but also made peace in a way with her relationship with her husband. Because he's already passed away, their romance sort of evolves retrospectively, where she starts to see, I guess, the quality of their love and I guess how it was different from other relationships that she might have had in the past.
It sounds really wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
I loved it and I highly recommend it. It's called A Song for the Road by Kathleen Basi. Well, thanks, guys. Nice to hang out with you. by Zoom.
You too.
Great to see you in some form.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, in this episode we have reviewed Sea Wife by Amity Gage, H is for Hawke by Helen Macdonald, and A Song for the Road by Kathleen Basi A. We'd love to hear from you. Email bookclub@hopemedia.com.au. And thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life, especially life in lockdown, is better with a book.
Hope 103.2. Thanks for listening.